This week on Quality Digest Live, we'll chat with Benjamin Mack about supplier management and information security.
Plus, what's the true value of employees, or bosses for that matter? That and more when we come back.
Welcome back to Quality Digest Live for May 1st, 2015. QDL is your weekly look at who and what is making the news in the world of quality. I'm Mike Richmond, publisher of Quality Digest.
And I'm Quality Digest editor-in-chief, Dirk Ducharme. Well, there was a story by Andy Zoll in manufacturing.net that caught our eyes this week. It had to do with the H-1B work visas. In his article, Zoll described how the annual quota for H-1B visas capped out just 5 days after the government opened up applications for the upcoming fiscal year. By the way, if you don't know, the H-1B is the non-immigrant visa that allows companies to employ foreign workers in specialty applications such as engineering. Typically, that's where you see them used, sometimes in the medical industry as well. It requires that the applicants have highly specialized knowledge and at least a bachelor's degree or its equivalent. This is according to the U.S. Department of Labor. So according to Zoll's article, the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services received more than 65,000 applications for H-1Bs in just 5 days after the agency began accepting them. Now, the Senate Judiciary Committee last month held a hearing on bipartisan legislation that would in part raise the limit from 65,000 to 115,000 and enable future increases as economic conditions warrant. Now, anything to do with foreign workers or immigration is a hot topic right now on Capitol Hill, of course, as we all know. In this case, reformers of the program want to see an increase in the quota because not doing so will stunt the growth of high-tech U.S. companies, they say. The argument being that there isn't a big enough pool of appropriately skilled knowledge workers in the United States to draw from, so to stay competitive, they need to hire from abroad. Critics of increasing the quota argue that the program simply enables companies to recruit cheaper employees across the globe at the expense of American workers. They also argue that it causes foreign companies to send workers to the U.S. to acquire skills, the assumption being that they will then take those skills back home and we lose our investment in them, so to speak. I will agree that there is some substance to the latter argument. However, I'm not sure I really buy the first. The argument this is just a corporate ploy to hire skilled workers at lower wages. It makes really no logical sense. First, if you look at the law according for H-1B and H-1B1 legislation, it says, in part, workers must be paid the higher of the prevailing wage, the average wage paid to similarly employed workers in the occupation in the area of employment, or the actual wage paid by the firm to workers with similar skills and qualifications. So in other words, you're supposed to be paid, if you come over on an H-1B visa, you're supposed to be paid what the prevailing wage is, the higher of what the prevailing wage is in the area, or whatever is being paid at your company for a similar skill set. Now, could a company cheat and not follow these rules? Sure. How many would? Yeah, I don't know. But to me, the proponent's argument that it is easier to find the skills they want outside the U.S. makes a lot more sense. We already know companies of all sorts have been complaining about a skills gap in graduating college students. So if you aren't going to find them here, where are you going to go? And by the way, if companies want to hire low-cost, skilled knowledge workers, they hire them to work in their own country. I mean, we see this a lot in the software industry, for instance. India has a lot of programmers working for U.S. companies at lower wages than they would make if they were working here in the United States. If you want to keep costs down, you don't bring them over. They're bringing them over for a reason, because sometimes they want these skilled engineers and so forth to work with the company here in the States. But,
exactly.
But there's no cost savings in it. So there's a definite reason for wanting to do it. And further on, I think we have to think, I think there's this prejudice going on here. We think, and we've been saying this for more than a decade, we are in a global market. There is no such thing as just, the word outsourcing almost doesn't make sense anymore. It's just part of your supply chain is global. And to think that a supply chain is only the people who supply you parts is silly. Part of the supply chain is also employees. Employees are part of the supply chain. So when we think of the supply chain, why do we think of it only in terms of parts that we're buying outside? Part of the supply chain is also the knowledge that goes into manufacturing a part, which includes those workers. So why shouldn't we be bringing workers that meet the skills that we need in the same way that we go outside for components and so forth?
Right.
Sometimes it makes sense to shop in country, sometimes it doesn't. By the way, if you want to read some impassioned comments on both sides of this topic, you can go to the article. You can link to it from down below, and then just scan down to the bottom of the article and have yourself a good time reading the comments.
Yeah.
They're pointed.
yeah, they are, and people get stirred up about these types of issues. But yeah, the skills gap is a real thing. I think that it's been pretty well established that the skills gap actually exists, and American universities and American students don't generally go into some of these fields and the numbers in which industry needs them. And when you talk about engineers and highly skilled people. It's a global market force, right? It's a global economy, and you pull from wherever you need to.
You pull from where you need, yeah.
And it's to me, it's not a threat. I mean, but you can see when people have certain parochial ideas that they can become a threat or seem to be a threat. It's an issue that certainly, hey, Congress is on it, so trust Congress to figure it out.
Yeah, trust Congress.
Yeah. All right.
They never go wrong.
Yeah, right. Thanks, Dirk. Okay. Also in the news this week, augmented reality, or AR, is hot, and smart glasses are beginning to appear in various industrial environments. In fact, a Gartner report recently indicates that smart glasses are projected to save industry $1 billion by year 2017. So, as you can see, this is a potentially significant addition to the shop floor toolkit for manufacturers. Laster Technologies, which creates eyewear display technologies, they call it, also known as smart glasses, is leading the charge in this space. And in a news piece that we ran this week titled Increased Productivity and Effectiveness Due to Augmented Reality, Laster provides a case study in which their client, Framos, used AR glasses in their manufacturing process. Now, in the Framos case study, sensor cameras were required to fit into a tiny space on the eyewear, and high-quality images were necessary, free from what we know as the blur effect, right? We've seen that blur effect anytime you take a picture with your smartphone. But they couldn't have that, so they needed to have these cameras be kind of hardened to work in the glasses you can see right there to take these images. Now, other components of the Laster solution which worked really well for Framos were the mechanical integration with the glasses, the overall functionality, and the interface for application programming. And all that was executed through Laster's smart glasses. Now, this technology is also helpful for sectors in which accuracy is extremely important. So think about things like aerospace or automotive, medical device sectors such as that. One aerospace manufacturer referenced in this piece uses AR eyewear to provide its maintenance engineers, with virtual product diagrams, floor plans, and circuit diagrams, for example. Cost savings occur when engineering troubleshooters don't have to fly into a site and can instead test and even make repairs to equipment remotely. So this $1 billion that Gartner was talking about mostly is in that area where you don't have to have people come out, where you can use this augmented reality, these smart glasses, to see what's going on and make changes.
So the person on the other end is wearing the glasses, looking at whatever they're looking at, and somebody across the country
or the world is looking at analyzing it and saying, okay, this is what we need to do. Rather than flying somebody in to do that, you can do it remotely. So, I mean, these glasses, you can see it right there. I mean, obviously, they're glasses, right? I mean, you talk about a handy, portable device. You talk about the Internet of Things. I mean, this is a good example of that. And we're seeing in this case study how manufacturers, industry is really using this stuff. It's not just science fiction. They're using these things in practical methods to improve the process and make their process more efficient, save money. So good stuff.
I wonder if they give you X-ray vision.
I don't know. We'll find out.
Okay. According to our next guest, when we look at businesses today, regardless of their industry or size, we see the growing trend of tearing down informational silos. And this is a good thing because the less division that stakeholders have in their data, the greater visibility into all aspects of the business for everybody involved. So an increasing number of companies are seeing the value in providing suppliers with visibility into their quality and compliance system and are thereby reaping the benefits of true collaboration. Using the cloud to share this data is critical to this process. And here to discuss leveraging the cloud for supplier management is Ben Mack, pre-sales engineer at ETQ Incorporated. Hello, Ben.
Hey, Mike. Hey, Dirk. How are you two doing?
Oh, pretty good. Well, before we get started, just tell us briefly, what are the major differences, besides one being in the cloud, between, let's say, a cloud-based supplier management system versus a kind of a legacy client-server private network model?
Well, I think you hit on one of the key differences in that question, and that's the virtual private network. It's difficult to extend that collaboration and your processes to external personnel when everything is controlled internally. So security is probably the biggest differentiator between a cloud and an internal type of environment. And in my opinion, the second key difference would also be the administration, the responsibility, and the experience. Managing your IT, your security on a virtual private network is drastically different from managing it for a cloud-based system where external personnel are expected to interact with it. So it's just a matter of making sure that everything is still secure internal to your organization, but still being able to extend your processes and gain visibility into the data from your suppliers. And
you mentioned security. Before we get into security, let's look a little bit at some of the benefits of this kind of system. So, I mean, how would a cloud-based, let's say, corrective and preventive action system help with supplier-related issues? And maybe you have an example of that.
Sure. Well, I think the most basic example is being able to extend your supplier-based corrective actions directly to the supplier. The cloud-based system allows you to extend that process to have them interact and collaborate directly with you. To only manage the part of the issue at hand that they are responsible for, that is relevant to them, to their role, and to be able to achieve a more real-time type of collaboration on that data. So being able to identify an issue, as the example that you referenced, at the time of receipt of a material, you find a problem, an issue during the inspection, you're able to immediately initiate the supplier corrective action if the supplier is indeed at fault or is presumed to be at fault, be able to notify, to incorporate their feedback immediately because of the interaction with the cloud portal, have them interact with just the relevant portions of the process, but be able to achieve all this in real time.
Okay. So, Ben, talk about security a little bit. Now, I know you mentioned that, but what does that actually mean, and what does it entail for a supplier in terms of using these systems?
Well, it's quite a bit different. Whenever you have an internal system, you could potentially allow the external personnel, the suppliers, to interact directly with that system. However, there's a number of key security precautions to be aware of so that they are only able to see what is relevant to them and not more of your internal data. And so the cloud type of solution allows the best of both worlds, where you have a system for your internal management processes, your internal compliance efforts, and then if and when applicable, interact with the cloud portal, the supplier systems, directly through the cloud. So you're completely segregating the two systems. Each one is secure in its own right. You're not ever allowing the suppliers into your internal. You're just simply sharing the relevant pieces of the information on an as-needed basis.
Well, talking about sharing, I mean, I would imagine that some suppliers, at least, are fairly reticent, either for security reasons or other reasons, to willingly, basically open up their system or open up their data to anybody, including one of their customers, to look at their data. How do you convince suppliers to willingly use such a system besides just saying, hey, look, if we're going to buy from you, this is what you're going to have to do. Our way or the highway. What is in it for them? How do you convince them that this is a good thing?
Well, I think the same benefits that a company is attempting to reap through this type of real-time collaboration and an extension of processes is what they would gain from it as well. Nobody likes email, working with email, exchanging files through that. It just causes all sorts of slowdown, miscommunications, missed details, and so on. Being able to achieve the real-time collaboration is not just a benefit to the company, but also to the suppliers. Being able to interact and process whatever details they need to gives them that comfort level as well, that things are being taken care of. Not only are you improving your supplier quality, but they're improving the quality in terms of what they provide to you as well.
And I'm assuming that in systems like this, that let's say I'm the company, it's Quality Digest, we got a bunch of suppliers, that I can get some consistency in how the data is supplied from, so that all suppliers are supplying me the same type of data in the same format through some sort of templating system. I mean, is that reasonable to assume?
I would assume so as well. I think that would be the strongest benefit, is to standardize your processes when you extend it, so everyone is operating on the same foundation, on the same level. One supplier knows that they're not being treated differently or having to go through more work than another one. Everyone has the same overall approach, benefit, and ultimately the solution is to generate a better product in the end.
Okay. Well, if anybody's interested in more on what we've just been talking about, the supply chain and mitigating supplier risk through the cloud, we do have a webinar coming up on this next week, May 5th at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific, and it is appropriately called Mitigate Supplier Risk Through Cloud-Based Quality Management Portals. Ben is going to be the subject matter expert on there, and I'm going to be hosting it. So if you're interested in this, and I think a lot of you probably are, you all have large supply chains, I know a lot of our customers do, be sure to tune in for this webinar. It's free, and you can just get to it by clicking on the article link down below, and within that article there is a link out to the registration page.
Sure is, yep.
So be sure to join Ben and I next week, May 5th at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific. Ben, thanks for joining us on the show this morning.
Thank you both. I look forward to the webinar. I'll talk to you then.
Okay, see you, Ben.
Thanks, Ben. See you then. Good stuff. Yeah, and I think a lot of people are interested in the supply chain. Absolutely out there. And
well, like we said, the supply chain is, it's a global world, and almost everybody, to some extent or another, is extending their supply chain outside of their own community. Even.
Yeah.
So.
And using the cloud is important, and security within that is really, really important. So real good stuff. So check that one out again. It's Tuesday coming up. The link's in the article below, and we'll send you an email on Monday as well to make sure that you get it that way too. So check that out on Tuesday. Okay. Yeah. Well, Value Equals Worth Minus Cost by Jack Dunnigan appeared in Thursday's issue of Quality Digest Daily. It's the next feature article that we want to talk about here. Well, in this piece, Dunnigan poses I think a fascinating question. What exactly is the true value of a person working within a company? Good question. Well, Dunnigan takes pains to point out that he's not talking here about the intrinsic value of a human being as a member of society. Nobody should ever be judged as a person based on what they can or can't do for us or our organizations. However, as Dunnigan points out, some managers are guilty of doing just that. We've seen that, unfortunately, in the past, where people will say, "What can you do for me?" Me, personally, or the company. Yeah. Well, that's not really what this is about. No, what he means here is simply assessing, as all managers must do, the contributions, tangible as well as intangible, that people make to the success of the company on a day-to-day basis. And to perform this undertaking properly, managers must be able to judge themselves by the same standard. The goal, of course, is to increase the efficiency and efficacy of the organization, to reduce waste and provide more value where it counts most of all. Of course, that's for your customers. So, to get a sense of value, one must consider the worth as well as the cost that the individual brings to the larger organism of the overall enterprise. Dunnigan breaks this down into 4 component areas. I think it's interesting and valuable to look at these 4 areas that he breaks them down to, and I want to show them to you here as I talk about them. The first is tangible costs, and tangible costs are things like salary, benefits, company tax contributions, anything that you can account for on a ledger that ties back to an employee, anything that you can physically pay to an employee or comes off the books that goes to an employee would be tangible costs. Second one is intangible costs. Those are things like training, management oversight, failures, problems, damages that are caused by employees. You can't necessarily put those on a ledger, at least you can't before it happens.
True, yeah.
But those are things that you need to be thinking about. What potentially are the intangible costs of having an employee? What can they do that might cost you money that you're not accounting for when you bring them into the organization? Third one is tangible worth. We move on to worth now. The tangible worth of an employee is things like widgets produced, hours billed, revenues increased, the things that, again, looking at a ledger, you can say, okay, this employee or group of employees, team, whatever it be, is responsible for making us this money. They have this value that we know we can pin down on a spreadsheet. Fourth and finally is intangible worth. And this is things like, and these are all very closely related ideas of self-sufficiency, the ideas they bring to the organization, understanding what needs to be done and being able to work independently. Of course, this is stuff that when you bring somebody into the organization, you're certainly hoping that they're going to bring these worths with them, but you don't know for sure. You don't know for sure. You can't beforehand put down on a spreadsheet what the value of those people, the worth of those people are going to be. Here's the thing though. To really understand the true value of anyone in the organization, to actually derive an accurate figure in the worth minus cost equation, a manager needs to be able to assess with a good, I would say a great degree of accuracy, the intangible factors listed above. Again, pretty much anybody can plop numbers into a spreadsheet and understand the tangible cost and the tangible worth attached to a person within the organization. But those intangible things, which can be taught and coached, mentored and improved upon. Yeah, sure, you can squeeze more value out of the tangible things too, but without question, the greatest benefits come from helping employees see the intangible factors that are tough to measure, but again, can be controlled and improve those intangible things, especially when it comes to the intangible worth of a member of your team. Their drive, their self-sufficiency, their creativity, their innovation, their ability to work independently, these are the keys to unlocking really an incredible amount of value in your organization, and it's a power that can be shared and it can be cultivated. Some people think it can't be, but that can definitely be cultivated and improved within the organization. Most people, this is interesting, Dunnigan pointed this out and I thought about it, most people underestimate their personal power and value. And I think that's probably true. I think most people don't really realize how much they really contribute to a team. Now, as a manager, you need to help them recognize and take possession of their intrinsic ability to create value for you, for the company, and again, of course, for your customers. And finally, this is an important point too. Managers, even top managers, are not necessarily excluded from this practice. With focus intent, you can embrace and extend your own value by doing the same thing you do with your employees, assessing your tangible and intangible costs and worth and taking steps to improve wherever possible. As with the rank and file, the intangible factors here are often the ones that will most quickly move the lever and supercharge the overall value of the organization. And that is especially true, I think, for managers whose tangible efforts to push out more product or cut costs are never going to be as important as the higher order functions of strategy and innovation, differentiation. It's the old saw about working on your company and not in it that many of us hands-on manager types are sometimes, many times I think, guilty of undertaking. So the moral of the story, think about extending your intangible worth as much as you can and you'll have done your job wherever you are in the hierarchy of the organization. Intangible worth, that's really critical and it can be cultivated, it can be improved, but you have to know it, you have to see it. It's just like waste. You can't improve it if you don't see it. So you have to first see it and understand what you're really doing.
So was he saying that you can put a dollar value on intangible worth?
He says it's very hard. He says it's very hard to put a dollar value on it, but you know it's important. You know that things like creating new ideas and being more efficient, being self-sufficient, doing things that are going to help the organization will help the organization. You can't put a dollar value on it certainly beforehand.
Well, sure, yeah.
You can't put a dollar value beforehand, but afterwards, sure, in retrospect, you can begin to see, well, heck, if we had never developed that new product, if our management team hadn't developed that idea that we could do this, penetrate this market, have this idea, develop whatever.
And that idea came from Frank, therefore Frank helped us make X amount of money.
X amount of money in the long run. So it's more of a backward-looking thing, but you know going into it on the forward end that it's going to be really, really important, and you know that you can help people do better with it. You can do it better yourself as a manager, and you can thus really improve the organization. Again, I mean, the tangible stuff is just the tangible stuff. I mean, of course it's important. Of course it's very important to improve your tangible worth and cut your tangible expenses and costs, but the intangible stuff is where the real value is. I think that's what Dunnigan's saying in this piece.
Okay.
Good stuff. I love Jack Dunnigan's stuff. He really does a good job of talking about management. And you know, I actually have another article I'm going to cover now.
Oh man, you still talking?
I'm still talking, but this is interesting because I didn't realize until last night as I was putting this together a little bit that these two kind of go together a little bit actually. This one is from John Keyser. I believe it's Keyser is his last name, Keyser, and it appeared in Wednesday's issue of Quality Digest Daily. The article is Why Corporations Must Earn Our Trust, and that appeared again in Wednesday's issue of QDD. In this one, Kaiser gives us a historical perspective on the evolution, or as he might say, the devolution of trust and quality in corporate America. Although the themes apply to customers and the need to build or rebuild trust there, he's mostly talking about the trust that employees need to have in the company, and that the company needs to show to employees. He asserts that when the quality movement reached mainstream corporate consciousness, back in the 70s or so here in America, there was a greater bond between worker and company. A lot of the energy in the field in those days involved teams and team building, and I'm proud to say that this organization of ours, Quality Digest, was in the forefront of that, of quality circles and quality teams, and we embraced that as an organization. But as time went along, finance people and investors began to challenge quality and lean initiatives, and they ask questions like, well, where are the savings? You know, as we pointed out in Dunnigan's piece, well, sometimes it's hard to know that going in. And sometimes it's even hard to pin them down going out, to say, well, you did these initiatives, where are the savings? Well, the pressure on that, the idea that you needed to have savings to please Wall Street, to have the corporate pressure every 90 days of a new quarterly report, well, that led to the idea that quality maybe was a cost and not a worth, as Dunnigan would put it. So Wall Street couldn't see the intangible benefits, so what they begin to emphasize was savings. Well, how are you saving money through doing this? And in many cases, unfortunately, what that led to was layoffs. People said, well, you know, we're gonna be leaner, we're gonna be more efficient, and we're going to cut some headcount by doing that. It happens through merger and acquisition activity many times too. So this idea that headcount was going to be a savings, you know, it's no wonder that workers lost faith in their companies. They said, hey, you know, I'm giving you all of my great ideas, and again, real lean, Toyota Production System lean, really involves your respect for people as a primary culture, a primary principle of lean is respect for people, right? And that's really important. So by getting rid of people, laying people off just to save money, that's not lean. It's not quality. It's not respecting your people at all. And I think that was where we begin to break apart, I think, a little bit in this idea. I want to, though, just quickly caution against this a little bit, because there's this idea that it always was better in the old days, right? And this article has a little bit of tinge of that, and I kind of responded to it a bit. I mean, this pressure of Wall Street to have cost savings, to make companies more efficient, to wring out more profit every quarter, that's been with us for a lot longer than just the 70s. So it's been there all along, and workers always had to respond to it and had to deal with those pressures. The difference is, and I think that the problem came because lean really talked about it in a very different way. That we're all in this together, we're all going to be a team, we're all going to come up with ideas together, we're going to respect you, we're going to do that right. And then it became the same old thing, where the workers many times were always the one who were victim of these cost-saving measures. And I agree with that in Kaiser's point that you know, that's not the way it should be, but it's always been that way. And to say that it wasn't in the 70s and 60s or the 80s, well, I don't know.
No.
I think it's always been with us.
Yeah, it's kind of a catch-22. Is you take a group of employees, you have 100 employees, and you have an output of X amount.
Right.
So then you get leaner, and so with the same number of employees, you can put out the same amount of product, but with less time and less energy on the employees. So you can either increase your output, or you can keep your output the same and cut back on employees.
Right.
And I think that's what a lot of companies do. Is particularly if you don't have to, if you don't have a market pressures that are forcing you to increase your output. Well, then if it took me 100 employees to do this amount of output, and now I can do the same amount of output with 80 employees, why would I keep those extra 20 employees?
Well, but the goal is to find them to do some higher value
well, yeah,
activities.
exactly, and
You
that's what
know.
those companies aren't doing,
Yeah.
which is they're not taking advantage of this extra bandwidth that they have now.
Well, you know what happens is, I mean, really what happens is you have 100 employees, and there's a variance in their experience and their abilities maybe, and the 20 that maybe you look at and say, well, they're the ones that are least experienced, they may have the least education, they're the ones we're going to get rid of. As opposed to looking at the top 20 and saying, who are the 20 best ones who can do more higher value work? The 20 that are at the bottom, train them up, get them to be better. The 20 that are at the top, move them on to higher value activities.
I'm glad you said we have an article coming up, I think, next week. We already ran one by her. Carrie Van Dale actually talks about this whole thing of the value of your experienced workers and that tribal knowledge, and how do you make use of it. And we ran one article by her. We have another one coming up. I believe it's next week. So Carrie Van Dale, look out for that. She actually talks about specifically that problem. Taking that 20%, your expert 20% workers, and leveraging that knowledge. Number one, you want to capture that knowledge because very often that's a problem, is that knowledge isn't captured. But then you want to also do something with those employees to make sure that they stay and that that knowledge they have also stays with the company.
No doubt.
All right. Well, following an announcement last week that QualityDigest.com is now mobile friendly on your smartphones and tablets, you can now listen to this show, Quality Digest Live, in podcast format by visiting the iTunes store on your Apple device and searching for Quality Digest. If you're using an Android, you'll find the podcast through your preferred third-party podcast app as long as it supports iTunes connectivity. So to guarantee that you see the latest episodes or hear the latest episodes as they go live, make sure you subscribe. So if you can't always make the time to watch the show during the week, you can listen to it on your Monday morning commute.
Yay.
Yay.
Be with us. Okay.
Listen to Mike and Dirk.
That's right. All
That
right.
doesn't
Well,
put you to sleep, nothing more.
that's right. Well, hopefully not when you're driving to work.
Well, that is the danger.
That's right. All right. Well, before we go, we want to bring you our tweet of the week, and this one hits home with, homeowners actually. As Twitter user Rick Broody notes, quoting Doug Larson, "People are living longer than ever before, a phenomenon undoubtedly made necessary by the 30-year mortgage." Well, as a mortgage holder, I can tell you that's true.
There you go.
So for more great tweets on business management quality and indentured servitude to banks and other financial institutions, be sure to follow us on Twitter at Quality Digest.
That's right. So that is the end of this episode, but just a reminder for those of you who are managing supply chains, we do have a webinar next week, Mitigate Supplier Risk through Cloud-Based Quality Management Portals with Ben Mack and myself. That's next week, Tuesday, May 5th, 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific. Be sure to sign up and watch that. It's something that's going to be valuable for you.
No doubt.
These are great webinars. So if we do say so ourselves, which
That's
we do,
right.
so there we go.
Which we should.
Okay. All right. Well, so thank you for joining us, and we will see you again
That's
next
right.
week.
We'll see you next week. Have a great weekend. Bye.
So long.